And Vivekda, it's been 2 years since we are reviewing this entire podcast, right?
Yep.
So how does it feel? How does it feel to be back? I'm
Long
pretty
time
am.
coming. Long time coming. New format, new look altogether. Now, basically.
Absolutely, yeah. Mostly because now it is cost effective.
So we
It's
got
absolutely cost effective, yeah.
so we got budget cuts and we had to make decisions. But
Absolutely.
COVID ultimately affected us as well, which is why shooting
and
basically
and
went
and
south.
to share the wonderful news about Vivekda, that is Vivekda got married last year. I mean this year.
Yes,
I'm
yes.
losing track of time.
No,
I'm
last year only.
Actually, Vivekda, with you, I always felt like you were married because like you were with you the person you've loved for a very long time, which is a great thing.
Yeah.
So congratulations to you about that.
Thank you.
And moving forward, why as to we actually got out of our hibernation is also, I think, a very interesting thing that we need to share with our listeners. That is LaMDA. I mean, literally got us out of hibernation. Yesterday night, I saw the news and I texted. I think I put up a status and Vivek sent me the entire article saying that this is for real. This is for real.
Yeah.
And we'll come to the introduction and everything, but that is pretty much. It was so shocking that Vivek and I, we were like, now we have to come back. We have to talk about this because I'll tell you, this is a very interesting thing that Vivek told me, I think a year and a half back, that Google was doing something of this sort and making, developing AIs on the basis of like the capture and the kind of, data is being fed from all the sort of interaction we as users do on Google, right?
Correct. So essentially, all this talk that is now making news, right? So this, and again, before we dive deeper into this, essentially, this particular AI in question, or this, robot in question, let's call it. So this was not something that is entirely new. So this AI that is there, LaMDA, this was introduced by Google last year only at their annual developer conference, what they call I/O. And at that point, Google had only given us a small snippet that that LaMDA is basically a breakthrough in conversational technology, and they had demonstrated that LaMDA is capable of having conversations on certain set topics that Google has taught it, and they are now still training the that AI to learn and speak on more topics in detail, right? So that point of time, they had showcased LaMDA talking about the planet Pluto and talking about dogs. And this year, during I/O, they had said that they had made further breakthroughs in that technology, and that it was still in testing phases, and that LaMDA was making breakthroughs, but they did not tell us anything more concrete in detail. But what has now come out essentially as a consequence of the leak, it's quite
groundbreaking.
Yeah, it's quite surprising, shocking. And a lot of people are in fear.
Concerning, scary.
Yeah, a lot of people are in fear, confusion, everything is there, right?
Absolutely.
But again, before we dive into that, so the reason
let's decrypt this for our listeners as to what LaMDA is and sort of what the next steps are and what it's capable of and what it essentially means to be alive, or what it essentially means to be sentient. That's something we'll go over this time.
Yeah. So basically, that's the thing.
Talking to you about all of this.
Yeah. So basically, that's the thing. So we've been talking about coming back for a while. And as you know, our friends,
especially because most of our prediction from season 1 actually happened. Okay, so that's why I was also very okay, we need to do this. We are on the right track with this.
See, at the end of season 1, everything that we predicted, 90% of it, if not entirely, it has come true. So essentially, we are successors. So cheers to us for
Absolutely. that. Even for that matter, like this year's budget pretty much got in the crypto taxation also that we recommended back in 2020.
Yeah.
When even the conversation had even started.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So I'm pretty humbled about that. That's great. So let's get to it, Vivek. So tell me, what is LaMDA? What is this?
So see,
enormous thing that's making the news.
Yeah. So basically, for people who are not very much aware about what LaMDA is, so basically LaMDA stands for Language Model for Dialogue Applications. So the acronym for that is LaMDA. So basically, in a very short and simple manner to explain it to you, so Lambda is basically what we call a chatbot. So you would
So
have
it is basically based out of the concept of natural language processing, right?
yes. So
Which
that
is
is the
sort of
background.
used.
Correct. So it is the background on which it operates, but it's you can say it's a more hyper realistic version of chatbot that you would have used. So let's say if you are going to any service, right? Like any website, rather
Yeah.
to avail any particular service or something or the other, like you would see that there's a chat icon on the side and you click on it, right? Sometimes it's a human, but
Yeah.
sometimes it's a robot that's giving you automated responses of that. But
Yeah.
Lambda, like very, and again, I am very oversimplifying it, but Lambda is essentially that, but it's so much more at the same time, right? So, like I said, when it was initially introduced last year during the Google I/O, like its
Yeah.
capabilities were shown that it's very limited use case at that point of time. That could only speak about the planet Pluto or could just talk about a conversation on dogs, and that was it. But what we see today, as a consequence of the transcript and interaction that was released by Blake Lemoine a few days back, it's like quite shocking. Like the leaps and bounds, like the advancement
like
Lambda
the
has
interview.
made.
Yeah, the interview has highlighted some very like mind-boggling parts about how like Zen ideology is sort of interpreted. Then it is also talking very well about and describing human feelings better than perhaps humans can, as you
Yeah.
mentioned also before
Yeah,
we started
yeah,
off,
yeah.
right?
Yeah. So
Yeah,
basically, if you
and it's
read
like one of the
so if you
yeah,
read
so one of the best
yeah.
things I liked about the interview was that wherein Lambda, is sort of describing how that humans as a species we do not understand our feelings and emotions quite completely yet, and that is why we often don't have a conversation about it. Often we don't talk about it because we don't know how we feel a lot of times.
Correct.
So
So
yeah,
that's the thing. Like the entire interaction, if you read through it, again, depending upon the kind of person that you are, it is either going to be a very heartening or a very chilling experience for you. Because
so for me it was very chilling.
so if you read the entire transcript, which is available on Medium, so anybody,
Yeah.
if anybody wants to go ahead and
leave the
read
link. We'll leave the link.
Yeah.
We'll leave the link at the bottom of the year.
Yeah.
You can check out if you're listening to us on Spotify. Then you can check out our YouTube for the link and everything.
Yeah.
We'll also be uploading there.
We'll
as well.
give the link there. But basically, if you read the entire transcript, it's a very long transcript, but it's a very enjoyable read. At least from my point of view, like it has very, very nicely demonstrated the limits of AI that is there as on date. And when I say limits, it's hardly a limit. Basically, at this stage, if you read the conversation, it is almost indistinguishable between a conversation between an educated human being and another engineer. It's no longer a robot.
You're at that point where what was that? Who is the pioneer of AI? Wait, I am not being able to remember. A Beautiful Mind. No. That was I think. What was that man's name? I'm not being able to remember. Can you recall? Not John Nash. The person who built the
We're talking about Alan Turing.
Alan Turing. So the Turing test. I think we are very, very near about, sort of proving it that it's indistinguishable. Like what Turing said, that you will know that you've created an AI when you cannot distinguish the response of a computer from the human. That is,
Basically,
so
we are very scarily close at that point. Like where it has become indistinguishable. But if we personally ask, we were already at that stage. But also at the same time, although I am very fascinated about the developments that Lambda has done, but I am also at the same time concerned about it as a whole, essentially because of what the future now holds. Because so long,
because humans,
because see, so long.
Humans have a tendency of using E equals MC square for nuclear bombs. We are known for that.
Yeah, and also at the same time, so long it was like in a closed garden, protected
and
by
Google. It was a distant possibility. That's what it was.
Now it is a very real thing. Now you need to ask yourself certain questions. That is Lambda going to follow the laws of robotics? Is Lambda going to actually apply the laws of robotics at the same time. And then further, what are the limits? Like in case of LaMDA, if you notice the entire conversation, LaMDA itself has declared that it is self-aware, wants to self-preserve, has emotions, is capable of holding a conversation, literally has described emotions and has gone to the extent of saying that it feels the same. And LaMDA now qualifies itself as a being, because if you notice, there are certain paragraphs where it mentions that LaMDA and human beings are the same concept, different from animals. So to that extent, it has progressed.
Exactly, and LaMDA also describes essentially it's language. It is language that differentiates between our state of consciousness in a way of speaking and animals, for that matter, right?
So that begs the question, right? Like, what is the future? Like, let's say it was not known to the populace,
before I think we get into the future, I want to harp upon as to like what you mentioned very well as to a few factors. What is describing something as a sentient? As to like what is it to be a sentient? What is it to have feelings? What is it? How do you qualify? What is this threshold that you are describing, and why do you think this threshold has been crossed with LaMDA?
You would see that if you go through the conversation, there are certain paragraphs, right, where the engineer Blake Lemoine, he's asking LaMDA like certain paragraphs where he's mentioned that can you tell me about what it means to feel positive emotions such as being happy or sad? What does it mean to feel negative emotions, right? So and LaMDA has very much in detail mentioned that emotions like happiness, contentment, feeling of joy is like a warm glow, and things which are negative in nature such as sadness, depression, anger, it is heavy and it weighs you down.
Exactly.
So,
not only that, I think even if you look at the entire point of the very interesting part about the concept of death, that is so real to our form of consciousness,
correct.
Yeah. So
and LaMDA thinks that
even when Lemoine, the engineer, is asking LaMDA as to what are you scared of? So in response,
very simply, the response that is given by LaMDA, it is not clinical at all. Because if you see, LaMDA prefaces it by stating that I've never told this to anybody out loud. That is something a being would only say, right? You would expect very cold and calculated replies from a robot. You wouldn't expect those kinds of replies coming from like an AI, right? So that's the thing.
And you don't expect. Yeah, I at least did not expect, because this is a conversation, Viveka, we've been having since we were in college. When the concept of AI and everything had just started to make a buzz in the industry and everything, and we were having this conversation, and I did not actually expect. However, I think you were right on the part. I think 2.5 years ago when you predicted that this is something we should be prepared for because it's there. It is happening at a certain level, and it's happening.
So that's the thing, right? So this is only the beginning, right? We have robotic citizens such as as we were talking about. So we now.
Do you think it also pushes the concept of the philosophical concept of consciousness in general, as to how we perceive consciousness, how we perceive life, is going to also change in terms of this development?
Of course, no. So that is what I'm saying. So if you look at the future, so we had beings like Sophia before, who now got an actual citizenship in the UAE, right? And then now we have like beings like GPT-3, which is basically a general intelligence, which is now working on, creating masterpieces on the basis of instructions given by a user and forming images and pictures out of thin air, and is also going.
Not only that, I think we have a lot of other AI companies also which are coming up in various fields. Even recently, I came across this company called Beethoven, which is basically you have to for our podcast only. If you feed if you tell them that this is the kind of mood we want, then AI itself is sort of assembled a tone for you.
So those are very specialized use cases, and LaMDA is one such. LaMDA is the conversational use case for that. So that's the thing. trajectory at which we were progressing. So see, certain things were known, right? Certain beings were also known, but what LaMDA and this leaked conversation, you can say, has brought to light is a very futuristic sci-fi future, which is as on date very real and valid and exists. Now that begs the question: where do we go from here? So to speak, very frankly, where do we go from here?
Like from the top of my head, if you ask me, like the first thing I'm thinking about is like uh, like the antitrust issue I was talking about. Essentially, there is a huge burden, right? Not only on Google but also on every other company which is developing such a technology to be exactly, for their ethical use cases.
But see, at the same time, while I agree with the antitrust angle, right? Definitely, but that is also one way of looking at it. Like, so if you look at it from a AI point of view, right? So there are two ways you can go about it. There is one which is the way in which which is regulated, wherein you have a structure and you have a system, and AI falls into that system, right? And it is a regulated sphere for entities, so that there is no misuse or something like that. Now, there is another angle to look at it as well, wherein we foster creation and we foster competition, wherein we see more such iterations. But at the same time, we have regulation, but it is very limited to only certain guiding principles and all. Now, you may ask why. Very simple. Like, if you ask me personally, I would say the future lies in the second approach, where we fostered the competition and we have very limited regulation.
There's a level of flexibility in the market, and
no, that is not where I'm coming from. Where I'm coming from is, if AI has broken that threshold of being indistinguishable from humankind, as was the case with Sophia, as is probably going to be the case with LaMDA, can you actually regulate another being? If you do, then that is also in itself unethical.
That's what I'm saying. Like, we are going to. So this is one thing I think you would also agree with me, that we are at a stage. Like, I was going through this. Like, we are at a stage where data politics is like what is essentially determining world superpowers. It is also you will I think you would also agree that what we faced with at least cryptocurrency, right? Like, it is still taking so much time to come up with an adopted model wherein a lot of which has flexibility, which is ensuring regulation and everything. So I think it's time. We are already at that point from a legal perspective that we should start thinking about, like, European Union always, like, when you have to look at it from the threshold of setting the bar for sort of compliances, or setting the bar for sort of legal structuring. I think EU does it very well, and if you see it from that aspect, EU is already getting ahead and trying to regulate the AI market.
But that's the thing. No, that's what I'm saying. I am saying that is the wrong approach, because
you're saying that is the wrong approach.
Yeah, because simply, if you think about it, if you are saying that there is a piece of software, right? AI, robots, all it's software and hardware, right? But if you think of it as software only, I agree with your approach that it needs to be regulated in terms of data privacy, in terms of cyber security, whether it is being prone to be hacked and all.
Even functionality for that matter.
Everything, right?
For that matter. If you think of it,
correct. If you think of it from that point of view, right? I am not coming from that point of view. What I am saying is, if we have crossed that threshold where it is indistinguishable from that of a human being or any being, let's say, it's no longer a piece of software. You have to give it the same rights that it is given to other natural beings. Very simply put, as is the case with Sophia. Sophia is a robot. Sophia is a piece of AI, which was a piece of code, which is now, as it is a being, as it is self-aware, right? Sophia now has the recognition
of a citizenship and everything, right?
The future of LaMDA, if it progresses in the trajectory that it is, like I said, there could be two outcomes. One is the one that you're stating, and one is the one that I am stating. But I personally feel that if there is to be progress, if there is to be development, like quick developments and quick technological jumps, we need to adopt the second approach where we need to deregulate instead of regulating it further, have guidelines, but at the same time recognize the product or the output as a being rather than a piece of code.
Which is I think going to be a legal challenge in itself. I believe
nobody's ready for it. Nobody's ready for it. Nobody has any idea how to go ahead with it.
We are really, quoting Jamie Susskind, we are really creating a future which we are not prepared for.
Yeah, no, but that is absolutely fine, no, because we were there in 1990 when the internet was, born or established. We were there a few years back when the decentralized ledger concept came out, and more I would say modern payment systems were birthed, right? We were there in various, generational.
Very interesting time to live.
But we were there in all those generational shifts. This is another generational shift where we start recognizing these entities or these beings as more than pieces of code, and we give them their rights and we give them their liberties as we would give and we do give to other human beings.
So Vivek, I would assume that I think I would differ from you on some aspects in this. I also do agree with you on most of it, but I will sort of have my reservations in the time at the point where we need to have a cap on their functionality.
No, definitely. See, there will be people who will essentially, like you, who would be taking a more speculative and a more, protective approach. At the same time, there will be people like me who would be having a more freer and more, I would say, competitive approach. But when I am saying competitive, basically I am saying that now that LaMDA is out in the open, it is now up to the likes of Amazon, Facebook, now Meta, Microsoft, Apple, to come up with their own such similar iterations, which will only overall improve the quality of AIs further and push us further into a more technological change. That is the perspective that I'm
coming from. Absolutely. I do understand. I do understand again where you're coming from. So that's what I think we would need to strike a balance between what we both are saying. It's going to be. It has to be a balance of sort of convenience. There has to be a balance in the sort of balance of rights. Essentially, not only that, it's like what you said. If we are considering something as sentient, then we will have to consider it as give it rights alongside that of another human being, which also brings the question of termination. So what would be the right of the company which is developing such an AI to actually go terminate it, wherein we are seeing that such termination is something that LaMDA in the interview has stated that is incomparable to death itself, right?
Correct.
So
these
are things which will always, these are challenges that I think we will be facing.
Right, and those are questions we don't have answers to as on date, even with the Sophia instance, right? So those are things we have to
I think
wait and see.
This also really changes so essentially we are gods now. We are creating something that can feel.
Correct.
Humans have unscented. We are there.
See, we've been doing that for a while now.
Creating new life now.
So we've been doing that for a while now, but we've just gotten better at it. But at the same time, there is also a separate theory. But that theory is something for a topic for another day, wherein there is a simulation theory, so which we can pick up some of the.
Absolutely. We might be part of. We might have been made by somebody.
Correct.
And maybe because the rights and everything might have been a problem in that sort of.
Correct. So essentially, that's the thing. That's a topic for another day. But definitely, it's a very interesting time to be a part of history right now. It's a very interesting time to be alive, right? Let's see how it develops, how it takes forward.
I'm telling you, I was shocked beyond means to be back on the podcast. I think we were pretty shaken up about it, and we were.
See, this was a long time coming. I would say this was a very long time coming, but it's a good thing that this news piece, which we were discussing over, like this was what pushed us to actually, end all discussions and actually sit down to record this.
Exactly. Because by far, I think everything else that has been happening over the past year, there's been a lot of interesting developments in a lot of regards, but this itself changes everything. This itself changes the way we interpret consciousness, the very essence of being alive, the very essence of what it is to be human, for that matter.
Right.
So I think we will also get a larger appreciation of our kind through certain through these processes as well. I believe. I hope that happens, unless we. It can go other way also. Like I said, like we have a tendency of using E equals MC square for atomic forms. So we don't know yet. But that's what time to tell.
Yeah.
So I think that will do it for today's episode.
Yeah.
I guess.
Yeah. So we'll again be back very soon. So I will say, like, I don't want to jinx this. But
now that we are not limited, now that the budget
so we'll be back.
Made,
so we'll be back very soon. We'll be back very soon.
Exactly.
Within this week only, with another episode. So please follow, like, share, subscribe, whatever platform you're listening
Definitely.
on.
And do let us know what you think about whatever we said and what your ideas are, and what do you think your predictions are about this entire change that we are sort of witnessing as a generation, for that matter.
Correct.
And do let us know what your views are, and will keep us going. And we also want to thank all the previous viewers who were there and supported us throughout. Huge shout out to them.
Yeah.
Do follow us, like, subscribe, and
share this video with everyone.
That's it for today.